Good morning, Table Fam. Good to see all the 12s showing up this morning. Somebody said to me the other day, I love the 13s. I said, you mean the 12s? Like the 13 is no good. That's Friday the 13th. We're the 12s. And even if you're not a 12, we love you. You're still part of the family. A few weeks ago, my office is over here during the week. I have a desk, and I was working. And a young boy came in, probably around the age of 12 years old, and he walks in and he says, "What is this?" And I said, "Well, we're a church." And he says, "A what?" I said, "We're a church." And I thought he couldn't hear me. So, when you think people can't hear you, you just talk louder. Anybody else do that? I said, "We're a church." And he's standing there with this puzzled look on his face. He goes, "What's a church?" And I had to stop and explain what church is to a 12-year-old boy who didn't know what the name church meant. It's a good question, though. He poses a good question. He says, what is the church? We're going to talk about what the church is today. Some of you know Vince Lombardi, coach of the Green Bay Packers. It was said that at the beginning of every football season, he would hold a football in his hand, and he would look at the NFL players, and he would say, "Gentlemen, this is a football." And he would start explaining the game of football to professional athletes. Now, why did he do that? Vince Lombardi did that because he knew that they needed to know the basics if they were going to win championships, right? And church, just like football players need to know the basics of what a football is, followers of Jesus need to know the basics of what the church is. We're going back to the basics. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, back to the basics. We are going back to the basics. Now, here's the interesting thing. That word church can mean different things to different people. The word church probably meant something different a generation ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And how many know people's perceptions of words can change? Even though the word don't change, the perception of the word can change. For example, when my daughter was in middle school, she's much older, in her mid-20s now, but when she was in middle school, she overheard me talking to somebody, and I met somebody new. And in my generation, when I was growing up, when you wanted to hang out with somebody, you said, "Hey, let's hook up sometime." Right? So I just said, "Hey, you want to hook up sometime?" To which my daughter, her eyes got big, and she pulled me aside later. She said, "Mom, you can't say that anymore." And I'm like, "Why? What does it mean now?" And she told me what it meant. So I don't say that anymore. I don't say that anymore. But words change. Perceptions change. Barna research tells us that 80% of people inside the church who say, "I'm a Christ follower, I'm part of the church," 80% have a good, positive perception of the church. That's pretty good, right? They recognize, hey, the church, yeah, we might be a little messy. Now, there might be some issues, but we're doing some good things. We're making a positive impact in the world. However, on the flip side of that research, they found that only 20% of the population outside of the church has a good perception of the church. That means 80% of people walking by today who are not part of the church have a negative perception of what the church is. Somebody say, ouch. So today we're going to talk about what is the church. I wish that little boy was here today, because we're going to answer the question, what is the church? We're going to go back to the basics. What's the church? What is our purpose? And why does it even matter to us today? We're going to have a table talk. I want to welcome back Pastor Brandon and Pastor Arianna to the table. Give them a hand. Oh, we got some fun stuff to give away today. I like this one right here. Little classic black and blue.
Can't go wrong with a black t-shirt.
Black and blue and green. Well, hey, so we're talking about perceptions of the church. What have been your perceptions of the church?
Yeah, I was raised in the church, so I feel like it started in my life as just a place you go. You know, like your parents take you to school, and then you always got to go on the grocery runs with your parents, you know, and
It's
it's
just
like
what you do.
It's just what you do. So it was just what we did. I was just there every week.
Yeah.
And then as I grew up, I started noticing more things. I started noticing just brokenness in my life, in my family, and even in myself. And church became a really safe space for me, where there were mentors, where there were people who wanted to speak into my life and love me. And as I grew older, I had so many good experiences, but I guess I started noticing as I was a teenager, like not everybody thought those same things about the church.
Yeah, absolutely. Similarly, I was like kind of always around it, and I just thought that's just something that people did on Sundays. And I remember going to school and be like, yeah, like how was church yesterday for you? And they're like, what? I don't go to church. And I'm like, what? I thought everyone did. But yeah, so it was mostly positive growing up. That's really where I got a lot of my community and my friends. My ride or dies were at church. But I have also can sympathize with some of the negative perceptions. I have plenty of friends, like I just said, who either didn't have any clue what church was or kind of had that stereotypical view of church. I don't know if you've seen the SNL skit with the church lady that, well, isn't that special? You know, that kind of thing, like a judgy old woman, and it's dusty in there, and it's just like there's a steeple and what's going on. So there's a little bit of that too. Yeah.
We all know that lady.
Yeah.
We all know that. No,
I hope
she doesn't go to this church. Yeah.
Oh, no.
You know, unlike you two, I actually, one of my first perceptions of the church was pretty painful. I was actually abused in the church at the hands of a Sunday school teacher, and I was around 7 or 8 years old. So some of my very first church memories was like church hurt. Like, this is not a safe space. But I'll talk a little bit more about how the church can, be hurtful, but the church can be helpful too. And as I grew later in my life, it was the people of God and the family of God that came around me. And I'm here today because of the church and the people who've loved me back into being. And so we're going to talk about what the church is, but let's talk about what the church isn't. Brandon, get us started.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you just said, sometimes it's easier to talk about what something isn't so we can understand what it is. It's kind of like, you ever see that thing where it's like, hey, I'll show you what not to do in order to show you what to do, sort of a thing. I had a cousin who was worked in a bank, and she was able to, they train bankers and tellers to be able to identify fake bills.
Yes.
So it was a fun party trick at Thanksgiving and things. We would pull out different, bills, and she'd be able to tell you the little markers to look for, and there's all kinds of different, secret things. And they get so good at it, they can even just feel a bill and just say, oh, that's not real. They don't even have to use the pen or check the little things. So we have to ask that question when we're looking at that question of what is the church. We need to learn first what it isn't. And that original word for church, it's from a Greek word, and it's called ecclesia. And that simply means the called out ones.
Yeah.
Now, notice how that definition doesn't say building, a gathering place, or building with steeple and stained glass windows. It says the called out ones. That's what the church means. Yeah. Right? And I think the first thing we have to realize this morning when we're talking about what the church is we have to realize that the church is a people, not a place.
Oh, that's good.
That's so good.
It's
a people.
That's right. That's right.
Right? And we use it, can we be honest, we use it as a place.
We
right?
do.
And it's like, let's go to church and
I'll see you at church.
Look at the church got a new backdrop this week, right? Come on, it looks nice, right?
Yes.
Where do you go to church, right? That kind of thing. But, it's not a place, it's a people. And Scripture is really clear that church is a people, and it's a people that God has called out to follow Him.
Yeah.
So if you call yourself a follower of Christ, then you are the church.
Yeah, that's good.
You're the church, right? We meet in a place called the church, and you can drive by and, oh, that's the church. You can point it out, but really, people are what the church becomes, right? So I want to ask the question to you. Why is it so easy to confuse the church being a place and not a people?
I think for me, it's so much easier to identify a place of location instead of identification, right? Like if I can say, oh, the church is that place over there, then I'm not identifying and saying, actually, I am the church, right? It kind of reminds me about the difference between renting and owning. I've rented a lot of houses and apartments, actually, across the country, everywhere from New York to Minneapolis to Seattle. But then I've owned a few places, too. And can I tell you, there's a difference between renting and owning, right? So I think the question for the church today is asking ourselves, hey, are we renters or are we owners here? Or are we saying, hey, I'm owning this thing. I am the church. It's not a place. So I think that's the struggle, because it takes a commitment to say, I'm the church.
Ooh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be thinking about that.
Yeah.
I think another barrier to us thinking of the church as a people is simply just our culture. I'm guessing most of us live in America, if not grew up in America. And these Western ideals of like individualism, like I am who I am, and it's separate from who you are, can kind of take us away from what a collective identity is, like the church. I think it's so cool that we're a multi-ethnic church, because there's so many different things we can learn from other cultures, from people who grew up differently than us.
Yeah, people who didn't grow up in America.
Exactly. Exactly. So the gospel, is shown through many different cultures. So collective cultures, like a lot of cultures in the East, they identify with, I am my family, and it has its pros and cons, but a beautiful part of it is that a community can identify together and feel relational and can feel like a quick ownership. So I think that can be sometimes a reason.
Those are both great reasons. And I think, I was thinking about that question myself, and I think sometimes, especially in our culture, maybe in the American culture, we tend to view church kind of like we view a restaurant, right? And like, hey, we go in and we expect a certain quality of service, and maybe we want a certain vibe as well. We want a certain aesthetic, right? If the music's too loud, and if it's too cold, or if it's too hot, and right, the preaching or the mood or the food isn't what you want it to be. Like you just kind of nitpick things. And I went to a Christian college, so I heard a lot of that. It's like I went to this church and I didn't like this thing, but I like that thing, and right, and that's it's okay not to like everything about a church, right? And I think it's actually healthy to say, hey, I love what you're doing, but maybe this, this place isn't for me, right? I need to find something healthy for me with people who are going along the same struggles of life that I'm going through.
That's right.
But hey, we need to realize that it's not a place, right? It's not something that it's just all to serve us, but it's a people, right? It's not just, you don't need to worry about the aesthetics and all that sort of thing. Really, what it comes down to is the people that you're sitting next to. That's the church, right? I love what 1 Peter 2:9 says. It says, but you are not like that, for you are a chosen people.
It's good.
You are a royal priests, a holy nation, God's very own possession. And as a result, you can show others the goodness of God. For he called you out. Again, that's that
Called you
word.
out.
Called you out of the darkness into his wonderful light.
That's so good.
That's what the church is all about. But Arianna, continue us on this journey of understanding what is the church.
Yeah. Well, do you guys remember about learning about metaphors in school?
Right.
They used to describe things like time is money, or he has a heart of gold. And there are these images that we use to understand a concept.
Yeah.
Did you know in the Bible that there's 90 different metaphors about the church?
Wow, that's a lot.
It must be a complex subject.
That's a lot, yeah. Somebody else was asking, what is the church?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, one of the most well-known metaphors for the church is that the church is like a body, and there's many different parts that make it up.
Right.
Romans 12:5 says, so in Christ, we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others.
That's good.
That means that we all have different unique gifts, but we are all one body.
That's good.
Just like your body has eyes and ears and feet,
Yep.
we, though different, make up one
That's
unified
That's
church.
right.
And that's beautiful. And if you just look around at this church and you're like, there's people who are different than me in age and ethnicity and gender. We are all different, but we come together as one church. And that in and of itself is a testimony.
So good.
And out of all the metaphors used in the Bible, one that resonates most strongly with us, with many of us, is that the church is like a family.
There it is.
Yeah.
The church is like a family.
That's good.
And I know the church has been family to me in my life. When I didn't have family, when my grandparents were far away, when my parents weren't close, the church was that for me.
Yeah.
It's easy for us to think the church is a thing that like has programs, it has policies, it's an organization. But the church is a family affiliation, not a corporation.
That's right. That's right. Say that again.
The church.
She's like, what did I say?
I was like, wait, there's something there. The church is a family affiliation, not a corporation.
That's right. That's right.
And that's how you are part of the church. You can't be part of a corporation, but you can be part of a family.
That's good.
Wow.
That's good.
Yeah, so this concept of church is complicated, but the Apostle Paul breaks it down for us. He planted dozens of churches. He's a church expert.
Yeah.
And here's how he describes the church in Ephesus in the Bible. Ephesians 2:19 says, "So now you Gentiles are no longer strangers and foreigners. You are citizens along with all of God's holy people. You are members of God's family."
Wow. I love that.
I know. Being
So
God's
good.
church means you're invited into a family.
Yeah.
You're not invited into an organization, but you're invited into a
good.
family, something that you can be a part of.
That's good.
And that's why our mission here at the table is belong, believe, become. The table is a church where you can belong, believe, and become who God created you to be.
That's good.
And I love that it starts with belonging.
Yeah.
It starts with belonging, finding a place where you can belong, where your input and your presence means something.
That's good.
And that's what a family is.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And I will take a minute to note, though, that family doesn't always have a positive connotation for everybody. Maybe sometimes you realize family can be kind of hurtful.
Yeah.
Maybe you've, in your life, seen family is very helpful.
That's right.
And maybe if you've lived a few years, you kind of know that family is a mix of the two.
That's right.
Right?
There it is.
So how has the church been like family to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I'm fortunate to have two incredible parents, but I don't have any siblings. I'm an only child.
Only child.
My parents are a little bit older, so it's fun to hang out with them, but sometimes I feel like when I go on vacations and stuff, I'm like vacationing with, older people. They're going to watch this and yell at me later, but
We
I
love
love
you,
them.
Mom and Dad.
We love you. Thank you for your wisdom. But yeah, I don't have any siblings. I don't have any grandparents that are alive anymore as well. So, really the church for me, that's where I had my siblings, right?
That's
it was
right.
the church. And
That's
I
right.
have friends who I grew up in church with
Yeah.
who are still like brothers to me today, brothers and sisters to me today. I've got grandparents. I've got aunts and uncles in the church, right, that aren't blood related to me at all. In fact, we would joke with people at my church growing up that this is my cousin. Now we're cousins, and we weren't related at all, but we're like, we're related because
I've done that before.
we're church family. So where I was lacking some family, where I didn't have brothers and sisters or people really in my corner in certain areas because of whatever reason they weren't here anymore or they lived far away. The church really filled that gap for me. They were my support system. It takes a village, right? That's what they say.
It really does.
The church was my village.
Yeah. I grew up in a family that, if I could use one word to describe my family of origin, it would be broken. Most people are using the word dysfunctional, right? If I asked you to raise your hands, who else is from a broken family? You don't have to do this, but my guess is most of us would raise our hands that there's some type of dysfunction in our families. And when that happens, it leaves us with some empty places, right?
Sure.
Of our lives. And the church, for me, has filled in those empty spaces. I've had spiritual mothers like Dr. Jody Dietrich, who has been like a spiritual mom to me over the years, who've just invested in my life. I've had fathers step up and give me wisdom. I've had brothers and sisters fill in and friends, just unfiltered friends who are with me on the journey. So the church, for me, really has stepped up and been the family that I've always wanted and needed.
Yeah, and I love just even throughout this talk that we can acknowledge that there are good parts and there are bad parts of the church sometimes, The church is made up of people. We are people.
Keep it real.
And people
Keep
are
it
messy,
real.
so I love that we can acknowledge acknowledge both sides of it. And I've just seen so much good and so much healing come in my life through the people of God, through the church, just similar to your guys' testimonies. I've had people who've walked alongside of me and mentored me.
Right.
I've had people who've spoken into my life and have seen things in me that I didn't see at the time, and it changed my life.
That's good.
And it changed my life. And I think so many of us are like, I want that. I want people who will come alongside and, love my kids. I want people who will check in on me and care about me. And my question for you, if you've been going to this church a while, is, are you that for somebody else?
Wow.
Are you mentoring a young person, a child, or are you checking in on anybody when they're not at church, when you don't see them?
Yeah, that's
Have you ever checked in on somebody in their darkest hour and seen how they're doing?
Good.
It's a two-way street. I love that we are the church, and it's a give and a receive relationship. It's a beautiful testimony.
So good.
It's a beautiful testimony. But I think sometimes it can be like, well, what does a healthy church look like? What is this?
Right.
Why does this even matter? And I love that Luke in Acts 2 describes this beautiful picture of what their church was like.
Yeah.
In verses 46 through 47, it says, they worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all people.
Yeah.
And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. And it's a beautiful picture. They had good food.
They did life together.
Yes, they did life together. They met
Yeah.
in each other's homes.
Yeah.
They were hanging out. They had great food. They were joyful. They were generous with each
Yeah.
other. And you're like, man, that's what I want our church to embody. I want to
right.
be a part of a
Yeah.
community like that. I want to be part of making that happen.
I think at the end of the day, all of us want to know that somebody's got our back, right?
So
I don't know
true.
about you, but I'm like, hey, when I'm hurting, when I'm going through it, I need to know somebody's praying for me. I need to know somebody knows when I'm not showing up and misses me when I'm gone, right?
Yeah.
That's
so
good.
true. And I think for some of us today, we're like, well, that's just any community. That's what community literally is. So how is the church different from any other kind of community?
Yeah.
Pastor Beth,
Yeah.
what do you think?
I want to circle back to where we started with that word ecclesia, the called out ones, right? Y'all feel smarter this morning that you're learning some
It's a Greek word.
some
right?
Greek words,
Okay.
you know.
I know
Now you
Greek.
can't say, hey, it's all Greek to me. You're going to say, yeah,
Some of it.
ecclesia.
Yeah, I
I
know
know
Greek.
it. I know what that means. I know what that one means. But a lot of us develop a lot of our time in life trying to figure out our vocational calling, right? I've had a lot of different jobs. I started out cleaning houses for many years. I've been a waitress. I have been a professor and now a pastor. But, you know, the reality is we all are trying to figure out what we're called to. But I want to ask the question, what is the church called to? What is our ultimate calling as the church? And if I ask that question to 10 different people, I would probably get 10 different answers, right? Because we do a lot. We give out backpacks, right? We visit prisons, and I was in the prisons just a few weeks ago. I'm in the hospital visiting people. We teach. We love on kids. We invest in our young people. We mentor. We train. We do so much. But what is the ultimate calling of the church? Well, Jesus gives us real clarity on this one. Sometimes there's just not clear questions to answers in the Bible. Sometimes I'm just, people try to stump me, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, I don't know. You're going to have to ask Jesus himself when you get there someday. I'm not quite sure. But this one is one of those ones that it's real clear. So listen up to this. Before Jesus left earth, a few of his followers, were there. And how many know final words are important? Mm-hmm. Like I'm going on a trip. I'm flying out this afternoon. I'll be back in a few days. But my final words to my husband are like, please make sure you water my flowers so they don't die, right? And I'm looking him in the eye and making sure he's paying attention. You ever do that with little kids sometime? Like, look at mommy, look me in the eye. Do you hear what I'm saying, right? And so this is kind of Jesus' moment where he's talking to disciples, like, look me in the eye here. I want you to hear what I'm saying. Mark 16:15, red letters, meaning these are the words of Jesus. He says this, go into all the world. Say go.
Go.
Go into all the world and preach the good news. Somebody say good news.
Good news.
To everyone. Say everyone.
Everyone.
Anyone who believes and is baptized will be saved. That's what Jesus said the calling of the church was, to go into all the world. Notice he doesn't say come. He tells us to go, right? And he tells us to preach the good news. And so theologians today refer to this passage as the Great Commission, because we were commissioned and told to go and bring the good news of Jesus to every nation. But the truth is that sometimes we treat it like a suggestion, right? But the church is united by a great commission, not a good suggestion, wow. Right? We show the heart of God by being the hands and the feet of God, but we can never forget that our main goal is to bring the hope of Jesus to the world. We can't forget it. In fact, everything we do at this church revolves around bringing the hope of Jesus to the world. Everything we do, our outreaches, our kid programs, Wednesday Night Light, everything we do is connected by that one goal, to do that. And so tell me, why is it so easy to treat the Great Commission like a great suggestion sometimes?
Convicting. I think sometimes instead of church being a place or a people, we can think of church as being a profession. We're like, that's a pastor's job, you know, talking to people about Jesus, like helping their lives change. That's a pastor's job. Like, that's not on me.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you can get it like, oh, that's not me. Like, you know, I go to work every day, but like I go do my construction. Like I go to my office and I type on my computer, but like that's not my job. That's a pastor's job.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's so easy to forget that we're all called.
Yeah.
We're all called to live lives of ministry and show what God has done in our lives to the people who are around us.
That's good.
The Great Commission wasn't specific to pastors. It wasn't specific to ministry workers, but it's for all of us. And I think sometimes, since maybe, you know, you didn't go to Bible college or like you haven't read the whole Bible and stuff, you can get a fear of saying like, I don't know enough to tell people about Jesus.
Yeah.
What if they have questions that I don't know how to answer? There can be a fear about it, right? And I think that can hold us back too from sharing who Jesus is with others.
That's
For
good.
sure. Yeah. You know, we talked a lot about a different metaphors for the church, right? You know, it being, you know, a place, and I said a restaurant earlier. I think also it can be seen as a spectator sport, right? It's Seahawks Sunday today, and, you know, I'm a Seahawk fan. I've got my jersey on, and I can identify as, you know, the 12th man or a 12, right? But if I drove down to downtown Seattle today, they're not going to let me
you on the field,
field to play, right? They're not going to let me, hey, I got to play that you should run. Like, no, I can sit maybe in the stands, but even then I got to pay to sit in there, right? So, like, we can call ourselves the church, or I'm a Christian, but, you know, there's, we think that there's a distinction of like, okay, well, I'm not a player. I'm not on the fields, right? I'm a fan. I'm sitting in the congregation. I come once a month or whatever. I'm just kind of a casual Christian, right? And that's not what the church is supposed to be, right? We're all on the same team.
Yeah.
And I love that, you know, we're called the table, because really there is a place for everyone at the table. And it's not a table that, I mean, this isn't a good representation, but it's a round table where we all are on the same level, right?
That's right.
We're all need to be bought in at the same level of buy-in here, because that's really what it is, right? There's not tiers to it. We are all on the team together. You have a spot at the church. So I think it's important to remember.
You know, in my 30 years of adulting, 30 plus years of adulting now, I've worked on a lot of different teams, and you probably have too. Can I tell you, the greatest teams that I've worked on haven't been the perfect teams, but they've been the teams that have a clear purpose. Can I just save you the trouble and tell you we're not a perfect church? If you came in here just wondering, let me just save you the trouble and say, we are a messy church. Jesus said it's not the healthy that need the doctor, it's the sick. So our church is a little bit like an ER.
Perfect
right?
church is kind of an oxymoron.
Yeah, there really is no such thing, right? It's a little bloody, it's a little messy, but there's a lot of love and your life will be saved, right?
Yeah.
But the good news is that we need everyone on the team. Everyone is part of the church, and we need you. You know, the thing that I love is that, like you explained, as part of the family, there's a place for everybody. It's not just something we put on a T-shirt. Yeah. There's a place for you at the table, is on the back of our church T-shirts. That's not just a slogan that we thought was cute, and so, you know, we'll put it on a T-shirt. It's something we truly believe. It's something the Bible teaches. When you're not here, something's missing, right? We need, have you ever heard that phrase, the world needs who you were called to be? Wow. We need you at the table. And I'm just so grateful that the church is not just kind of a pie in the sky idea, but it's something we get to live out here on earth. Yeah. It's even a glimpse into what heaven's going to look like. And oftentimes I look at this church, you know, people from different ethnic backgrounds, people from different generations, right? People who know what hookup means and people who don't, you know what I mean?
Like that's just you, Pastor Beth. I don't know.
She's like, speak for yourself. I know what that means. But people from all over, and yet when we come together, if you look around, can I tell you, I think we're getting a little glimpse of what heaven's going to look like. Wow. Heaven on earth we get to experience when we come together as the church. Today, if that little boy walked in here and asked me again, hey, Pastor, what's the church? I would tell him, hey, the church is a people. It's us. We're not a place. Yeah, we're meeting in a mall, but the church is the people. It's not a place. I would tell him, and the church is like a family, right? We're your brothers, your sisters, your mothers, your aunties, your uncles. And the church is We're united by a great commission, not a great suggestion. We're bringing the hope of Jesus to the nations. That is the church. That's who we are. That was who we were created to be. And I don't know about you, but I just get a little bit excited about being a part of the church and seeing where God is going to take this church. We're only 2 years old. We're just getting started. You haven't seen nothing yet, right? We're just scratching the surface. 500 backpacks yesterday, 1,000 people. Oh, it's going to keep growing, church. You just hold on. But can I just tell you, church, we need you here. We need you here. And so if you're visiting today, I would just want to say welcome home. Thank you so much for joining me at the table this morning. Give them a hand as they go.